Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. It's very late at night, so forgive me for having circles under my eyes and just feeling probably and looking like I'm out of it altogether. Just the it that you need to have life in you. But anyway, today I have a new Goosebumps book review for you. Today is going to be More and More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. 10 spooky stories. This is special edition number 5, which means it's number 5 out of the 6-book series that this existed in back in the day. Again, 10 spooky stories, excuse me. They're 10 short stories. These were typically short story collections. I've reviewed the first 4 books here on my channel. The last one was a Halloween one. I talked about that in either September or October, one of the two. But this one is not a Thanksgiving book in the middle of Halloween, and the last book being like a Christmas-themed book, which I'm super excited about reading. This one is just kind of a lot sillier when it comes to Goosebumps. If you think of some of the funnier, more comedy-based, more over-the-top, wild, silly, adventurous type of Goosebumps books, or stories that you've read in general from Goosebumps, this feels a lot like that. There were a couple of stories in here I think are really, really good, and one that actually scared me a lot. Not because it was scary, but because of something personal with it, but we'll get there in a moment. If you've read the book, you probably know what it is if you're familiar with my channel. I really enjoyed the book. The problem that I have is that the biggest majority of the endings suck. Almost every single one. It's a very short book. It's about 130 pages, as you can tell, which is typical for a Goosebumps book. And yet, each of the stories are probably like 10 to 15 pages long, somewhere in that aspect. And again, I had fun with pretty much every single story in the book. I don't think there was necessarily a bad story in the entire book. It's just the endings. The endings were not good. This was R.L. Stine pretending to be Stephen King, basically, in my opinion. But there were some cool stories in here, some really cool concepts. I think the book started off with a really good one, too. The first story in here was called The Haunted Guitar. It was actually about a boy and his friend that, this particular kid has an interest in getting into guitar playing. His dad hasn't bought him a new guitar yet, but they go over to this store. It's an old music store. It's recently been burnt down, basically. And they go inside and they find some stuff laying around, some old residue of old guitars and music books and stuff like that. And they happen to find one particular guitar that's in perfect condition. And it may or may not have caused his house to get haunted now that he brings this guitar home. Kind of sneaks it home and lies to his parents that a friend let him have this. It was interesting. It was a fun story. I enjoyed it. By the way, I'm sorry for taking so long to get back into Goosebumps book reviews. I read this like in one day. This book was actually really fun. It reminded me why I love Goosebumps more than things like Goosebumps. So I'm going to try to cool down a little bit on things like Goosebumps videos because I'd rather have the real thing, honestly. I think you guys would as well too from the comments I've been seeing a lot. And I get that. We're all having fun here. There's no big rush. I just wanted to apologize, just real quick, for not having enough Goosebumps book reviews during November. I just feel kind of bad about that. There's a lot of things I wanted to read that I kind of regret reading now. I wish I had read Goosebumps stuff to have some reviews for you guys, but still, just bear with me. At least this is a review we can all have fun with. The next story was Tune In Tomorrow. Basically, a girl and her family moved into a new house, and they have a cable box now. Or not a cable box, but they have cable now. They had to get it. They couldn't just have like random stations. They had to, if they wanted any stations at all, get cable. And there happens to be this one soap opera this girl is actually watching every single day at 1 o'clock. And for some weird reason, this story of this character inside of the box that has the same kind of name as the main character. The main character's name is Elizabeth. The character in the story of the TV has her name being Eleanor. The weird thing with this, every time that something happens to this character in the show, it happens to Elizabeth in real life. And again, this story was mostly fun. Little things that would happen to her and her family. It was like 3 or 4 different events that happened. I thought it was pretty cool, and then the ending sucked. The ending absolutely sucked. It was so stupid. Yeah, why? It ruined it. The next story was the one I wanted to talk about that scared me to death. I want to find that real quick. It's called Live Bait, by the way. I want to read you, well, I want to tell you something, and then I'll read you the first line of the story. For anybody who doesn't know me, who happens to not be familiar with my channel, I'm terrified of fish. I absolutely have this odd, weird, bizarre fear of fish. I don't know what it is. I hate them. I hate their guts. All of them, actually, not just their guts, but them in total. The first line in the story that immediately hit me the right way was, "There's one thing you should know before I tell you this story. I hate fish." And hate is written in all caps. So I was like, this is going to be the story for me. And it was. It was horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. One of the grossest, nastiest stories that R.L. Stine has ever written, in my opinion, involving fish. And it was awesome. I loved it. It was great. I was utterly cringing while I read the story. Have you ever read something that is so horrific, whether it be a real-life article about something that's fact, or have you ever read like a fictional book or something, where something has happened that has gotten to you so badly that you like crush your toes, right? Like squeeze your toes, right? Not with your fingers, but like, you know, like ball them up like a fist, like ball your foot into a fist type of weird stuff. That's what happened to me while I read this story, Live Bait. Live Bait messed with me so bad. Basically, these two kids, mainly the main character who hates fish, gets told by this other kid that they should go out fishing, right? And they go to a bait shop and they buy some bait. And the one kid is like doing all this horrific stuff, and it's absolutely sick. I mean, it makes me nauseous even thinking about it. I've had a weird day today where I felt kind of nauseous, and that has really gotten to me the more I've thought about that story today as I worked and whatnot on a Sunday. Yeah, I had to work on a Sunday. I was very pissed off. It sucked. But this kid, the stuff he would do with fish was horrific, in my opinion. Absolutely horrific. The one particular thing he did, I thought I was going to vomit reading the story. But I'll finish that whole part of this review up. The story was fantastic. I loved the ending. I thought it was all great. Probably the best story in the entire book, if I had to be honest with you. Right there with the haunted guitar was the first story. I'd recommend it up there with that and the very final story at the end of the book. Again, this whole book is filled with a lot of silliness and weirdness. This is no exception. This particular story, Live Bait, has a lot of weirdness and wildness to it that I enjoyed a lot and thought it really added a lot to the book and really made it even more fun to read because of my fear of fish. If you're afraid of fish, the story's going to mess with you. I'm going to be straight up with you. It's going to bother you. It's going to bother you a lot. I look really tired. Wow. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, too. Anyway, the next story in here is called Something Strange About Marcy. And this story, I was into it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. And the ending was so bad. The ending was so bad. And trying to flip the page, like flip the whole coin and the perspective so harsh and so hard that it ruined everything it had set up. It was the worst, easily, in the entire book, in my opinion. Basically, there's some people. They see this weird girl named Marcy. Keeps acting weird to them. They try to invite her over even to come and hang out with them, and she just gives them weird looks and kind of runs away sometimes. She lives in a tent. It's really weird. She kind of follows people out into the woods sometimes. Like the main characters get followed out in the woods sometimes. And they have to run away from her, right? The plot twist at the end of the story is so horrendously awful that I don't even have words. It may very well be possibly the worst thing Goosebumps has ever published. Ever. R.L. Stine or Goosebumps. Doesn't matter. It's horrible. It's one of the worst stories in any of the Tales to Give You Goosebumps books, in my opinion. And yet at the same time, it has this weird, like, kind of charm to it with the finale. Like, just, again, it's very silly. This book has that as a big thing going for it. And that story really kind of hit that on the head for me. It was awful. It's one of the worst stories I've ever read in my life. Anyway, moving on to the next story. It's called The Ghost Sitter. Basically, two brothers that moved into a new neighborhood. They have parents who are very much into the fixer-upper type of thing, like on HGTV, where they would buy a new house and fix it up. But this is supposedly going to be the last house they live in ever. They have to fix it up, though it's an old rickety house with a crooked chimney and everything. And I like the story a lot, and then the ending sucked. It's very common in this particular book. It wasn't common in the old books, the previous 4. It's just this particular one, for whatever reason. The two brothers are basically volunteered by the mom to go to the next door neighbors who are elderly's house every single day for a couple of days to take care of their house and house sit, if you want to call it that. And they decide to do that, but they also hear at school that this house is haunted in particular. And they don't know if that's true or not, but they start to encounter things the first time they ever go inside of the house. And the ending sucked. The ending sucked. It was very obvious. I think anybody who read this story knew what the ending was going to be because it was that predictable but that sucky at the same time. We all knew what it was going to do by the end of the book. And if you were reading this right now, if you're reading this story right now from this book and you're watching this video before that, again, I don't spoil anything, but whatever you guessed about the ending of this story or about the twist that will come at the end of every single Goosebumps story you ever read, you're already right. You're already right. You know what's going to happen. I promise you, you already do. It was bad. It was bad. Anyway, the next story was Fun with Spelling, right? This one was kind of fun, kind of silly, and then the ending sucked. They should have ended this on a really different note, in my opinion. Fun with Spelling was basically about a girl whose aunt had just left from spending time at the house and stuff with them. And she had left a book of spells behind because she's like a weird New Ager Wiccan weirdo. She left a book of spells behind on the main girl, the main older sister's bed. And the girl opens up and finds out there's some things you can do that are spells against your enemies. You know, spells to do this, spells to do that. And witchcraft is wrong, you know. But she goes ahead and does it anyway. So there's a particular girl at her school that's very popular, very pristine, very pretty, very rude. And this girl wants to do things just to be mean to this girl. I mean, the main character wants to do these mean things to that girl because she's an enemy. Like, she takes your spot at the lunch table or something, and she's automatically the enemy. You know, that's some petty standards, frankly. But it is a kid's book, so that's neither here nor there. She puts some different spells on this girl throughout the story, and they're cool, they're kind of fun, frankly. They don't really just... R.L. Stine doesn't tell you immediately what the spell is, he just kind of lets you find it out in the next chapter, or the next portion of the short story. It was kind of fun. And then the ending happened, and it sucked. It's just the theme here, man. Bad endings, you know? Anyway, moving on to the next story. Matt's Lunchbox. I actually enjoyed this a lot. This is a really, really good one. It's not scary, just fun. Basically, a boy accidentally leaves his name is Matt, by the way. He leaves his lunchbox on a I'm assuming a city bus and not a school bus, something like that. And it's lost now. He'll never be able to get it back. And his mom buys him a new lunchbox. It's very kiddie. It's kind of at the beginning of the school year type of thing, so it's hard to find newer lunchboxes because basically everyone is sold out. She buys him this really weird red plastic one like every single one of us 90s kids had. And it had a cartoon picture on it and stuff of 3 monsters. Well, it turns out these 3 monsters are alive and they happen to live inside of this lunchbox, and they don't have to stay stuck inside of the lunchbox, they can come out and whatnot. But basically they keep harassing Matt for food. They want him to feed them. And they basically never stop eating. You know, it's almost like a Gremlins type of thing in a weird way. And it was a fun story. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a really fun and kind of funny story. The ending was not very great. It's not that it sucked, it just wasn't great. It felt very Goosebumpsy, which all of these stories have that feel to them, which is good. It's good. It kind of saves most of the book, I would say. The story wasn't... The story was really good. It was the ending that wasn't really all that great, frankly. But good story. Good story. I enjoyed it a lot. The next story is Stuck in 1957. The story kind of sucks. Basically, a girl goes into a dresser. Well, I guess they moved into a new house, which is another thing with Goosebumps and another thing with this book. There's a lot of moving into new houses in this book. Family moves into a new house. Girl looks in a dresser drawer and she finds glasses that she keeps calling Catwoman glasses. They have like rhinestones on the side. I'm not sure if they're referencing like the old Batman 66 show or what, but they keep calling them Catwoman glasses. I don't know why, but I guess they are. And she puts them on, and for whatever reason her head starts tingling and twitching in the mirror. And she transported to 1957. I think her name was like Shana or something, or Shanna, something like that. And apparently she had traveled back in time to a place where there was also a person named Shanna or Shana or whatever, and she was looking at things through that person's eyes, but it wasn't really like that. It was like she was there herself, and nobody knew that she was not the Shana they knew. But she had this interest because her dad grew up in 1957, and she had this interest of seeing what the 50s would have been like, seeing Grease and all this other stuff, you know, dressing up the way they used to dress up back in those days. The story was not very good, and the ending tried to be funny, and it was not. It was pretty bad, frankly. It sucked, in other words. Anyway, moving on to the next story, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, which, you know, I was a little concerned about where this was going to go. For the most part, I liked the story. I thought it was pretty cool for the most part. It was kind of towards the finale of it that I wasn't into it all that much. It was very silly, like I said, another word to keep explaining with this book. And essentially there's a girl who is like obsessed with her looks, and she's obsessed with her mirror. Mirrors are another big theme throughout this book, even though I haven't mentioned it too much. They're in like every single story, basically. And it's like her reflection in the mirror gets tired of looking at her all the time and wants to take over. So it tries to like force her into the mirror and take over her place in reality. And it was kind of, you know, it was fine. I enjoyed it. You know, it was pretty good. Pretty good, honestly. Kind of saved the book a little bit, especially towards the end. And, yeah, it is what it is. The ending wasn't really awful, but kind of predictable, honestly, because it's Goosebumps. If it was anything but Goosebumps, I probably wouldn't have been able to guess the ending being that obvious, but it was. So, the last story in here is called What's Cooking. I actually really like that story. It had a very urban legend type of feel to it. I love when Goosebumps does things like this, like with Ghost Camp from the original classic Goosebumps run from the 90s, you know, the classic first book series. Loved Ghost Camp. I love the urban legend feel to it. What's Cooking is kind of the same story. It kind of starts up with this story from back in the 40s, where this kid is in present day in the 90s at that time, telling a story about back in the 40s where there was a woman who was called, she was nicknamed Chop Suey, and she was a cook named Susan who had a cleaver, and she apparently like did all these horrible recipes for kids at the school in the cafeteria. And the kids hated it, and at some points kids would get kind of a little worried that maybe there were like people in the food and stuff. And they didn't want to eat the food. And this woman went crazy. She was drug out of the school by police after chopping up tables where kids were sitting and trying to basically assault kids, which was new to me in Goosebumps. And essentially, she got drug away and put in like a mental asylum type thing. And apparently at some point, well, no, it wasn't a mental asylum. She was drug out by police, and then she went to somewhere else, like some other thing, some other kind of cooking job type thing. And apparently at some point she fell on her own cleaver. Like, they literally had suicide in Goosebumps, which is pretty wild. And I haven't seen that yet. That's new. You know, that must have been experimental and edgy at the time. This woman accidentally killed herself, rumor has it. And if you say her name out loud 3 times, or really her nickname, Chop Suey, 3 times, then she will come after you. And that's pretty much it. And a couple of kids do this whole ritual about saying Chop Suey 3 times. And they start encountering all these weird things. One of the first things that happens is they go to eat a sandwich at lunchtime, and even though they think it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it has liver on it. I've never eaten liver, mind you. The texture of how it's described here made me nauseous. Made me more nauseous today because of how I felt today. And let's just say that story got to me with that. But the kind of ghost story, urban legend thing I thought worked really well for this. I thought it was really entertaining. The story was cool. I thought the ending was kind of a little tongue-in-cheek. Again, a little silly. But it worked. It was actually suitable. It actually was well executed, in my opinion, for the most part. And to me, the ending of the book, I thought it was a good ending, too. And like I said, this book has its strong moments. It's not amazing, but it's certainly not bad. Like I said, these stories, for the most part, there's only really one story I'd say is flat out bad, maybe 2. But most of the stories you have a fun time with until the ending of the story, and that's usually where the crap hits the wall, and it just kind of makes you like, oh, I wasted time on this. But for the most part, these stories were good. I enjoyed almost every single one of them. I like the sillier comedic nature of this. If you like that aspect of Goosebumps rather than the scary side, I think you'll love this book in total. More and more tales to give you goosebumps. Like I said, it's called Special Edition number 5. By the way, doesn't that frog remind you of Zack Baby TV with the hat on and stuff? It did me. It did me when I saw it. I kept thinking it looked familiar, and I was like, why? And not that Zack Baby TV looks like a frog, but with the hat, it's kind of funny, in my opinion. But yeah, I mostly like the book. I thought I'd recommend it to you guys if you haven't read it before. It's pretty good. Like I said, it's not my favorite of the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series, but it was good. It was good. I'm glad I spent tonight reading it instead of watching movies or anything. I had a good time. It was enjoyable. That's really all I wanted. That's really all I expect out of Goosebumps. As long as it's entertaining, it doesn't matter if it's scary or comedic or anything. As long as it's fun to read and enjoyable, it's really all I'm looking for. And for the most part, I'd say this book is really good. For the most part. If I had to rate this book on a 5-star basis, I'd give it like a high 3 out of 5. Really good, really enjoyable. I like the cover art, by the way, with Curly trying to like catch stuff out in the swampy looking bayou. what did you think about more and more tales to give you goosebumps? Are you excited for me to review the last book in December, God willing, if I'm alive and have the time to? But what are your guys' thoughts on this book? What are your thoughts on the Tales to Give You Goosebumps books overall? Is this your favorite series of books from Goosebumps, or R.L. Stine for that matter? I know there's so many different Goosebumps eras, like the trilogy and the original classic stuff, The Most Wanted, The Horrorland, Hall of Horrors. There are so many different things. Does this happen to be your favorite? I'd love to know down in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about my review as well, and for each of these stories too, what you thought of those. Do you have a favorite story from this book? I'd love to know that as well. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Put them down below, guys. Again, high 3 out of 5 for me. It was really good, a really entertaining book, and I recommend it. Not my favorite out of the series, but it was good. It was good. Anyway, put your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.